I'll never forget the day I found out my boyfriend was married. He was still living with his wife when we met, and it changed everything, from the way I saw him to the way I saw myself in our relationship. Little did I know, that was just the tip of the iceberg. We met at a coffee shop near our office building, and I have to admit, he was everything I wasn't expecting. His charming smile and effortless confidence drew me in from the start. He was kind, attentive, and made me feel seen in a way that no one had in a long time. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and before I knew it, we'd been talking for hours. I found myself laughing more than I had in months, feeling carefree and light. He would often surprise me with small gestures, leaving my favorite coffee creamer on the counter or writing sweet notes on sticky pads. At first, I thought these were just romantic gestures, but now I realize they were calculated attempts to win me over. His perfection was intoxicating, making me overlook the tiny red flags that started to creep in. Like the way he would sometimes forget our plans, only to resurface with a charming excuse. Or how he'd get defensive when I asked him about his past relationships. I pushed these concerns aside, convinced that my intuition was wrong. Little did I know, I was just scratching the surface of a web of deceit that would soon unravel everything. As I reflect on those early days with Alex, I can see the red flags waving in hindsight. He was always vague about his past, never introducing me to his friends or family. At first, I wrote it off as shyness, but now I realize he was hiding something. There were times when his phone would ring and he'd hastily excuse himself, only to return looking flustered. I remember one particularly awkward conversation where he mentioned his estranged sister. The way he emphasized that word still sends chills down my spine. Looking back, it's astonishing how many warning signs I ignored. His inconsistent stories about his previous relationships, his evasive answers when I asked about his family. It all adds up to a very clear pattern. As you'll see in the next part of this story, these red flags were not just random anomalies. They were actually crucial pieces of a larger puzzle that would soon reveal a shocking truth. As I share more details, you'll start to understand how these seemingly insignificant moments foreshadowed the catastrophic revelation that changed everything. The move-in story, which was supposed to be a milestone in our relationship, ended up being just another brick in the wall of deception that was about to come crashing down. It was a typical Sunday afternoon when he told me about his estranged wife. We were cuddled up on the couch, sipping coffee and watching the sunset through the living room window. He mentioned something about her being unwell, that they'd been separated for years, but still hadn't finalized their divorce. I remember thinking how sad it was, how he'd had to deal with such pain in his life. He spoke about her with a mix of sadness and frustration, making me feel like the victim, not him. But what struck me as odd at the time was that there were no photos of her anywhere in our shared space. No mentions of her on social media, or when we talked to friends. It all seemed so staged. I pushed it aside, thinking maybe he just wasn't ready to move forward yet. But now, looking back, I realize how red flags those moments should have been. The way he downplayed their relationship, the lack of concrete details about what had happened between them. He was a master weaver of deceit, and that story, it turned out, would be just one thread in the intricate web of lies he'd spun around me. I tried to brush off the initial doubts, but as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He'd become increasingly secretive about his phone and computer usage, insisting he was just working late nights or taking online courses for a new hobby. But when I asked to see what he was studying, he'd get evasive, saying it was private or just between him and his instructor. Little things like that started to add up. The way he'd quickly delete texts or emails on my watch, the hasty excuses for not being able to join me for spontaneous plans. He'd never done this before. We were always open with each other about our lives. I couldn't pinpoint what exactly was bothering me, but the feeling of unease grew stronger with each passing day. And then there were the times he'd forget his wedding ring at home or claim he lost it in a public place, only to retrieve it from who knows where hours later. It was as if he was living two separate lives, and I had no idea where reality ended and fiction began. I remember the day like it was yesterday. We were driving back from a weekend getaway, and I had asked him to pick up some coffee on his way home. He came back with 2 cups, but one of them was in a different cup sleeve, not our usual brand. At first, I thought nothing of it, but as the day went on, that small detail kept nagging at me. We were supposed to have dinner plans with friends that night, and he had mentioned earlier in the week that we would be meeting his family for a barbecue. But when I brought up the topic, he seemed evasive, saying something about not wanting to burden them with our plans. It was as if he was hiding something from me. I brushed it off as paranoia at the time. After all, what could possibly go wrong? We had been together for 3 years, and I thought we shared everything with each other. But, looking back, there were so many little red flags that I ignored. The way he would accidentally leave his phone on silent mode when we were out, or the fact that he never met my friends at home, always just dropping by after work. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a journey into a nightmare that would change everything. We had been dating for a few months when he asked me to join him on a trip back to his hometown. I was excited to meet the place where he grew up, and more importantly, to spend quality time with him. He presented it as an opportunity for us to get closer, to feel more connected. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a journey into a nightmare that would change everything. As we arrived in his hometown, he introduced me to his friends and family, making sure everyone knew who I was. But then, there she was, the woman he had mentioned as his estranged wife. She was standing by the window, watching us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He brushed it off as just a coincidence, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. We spent the next few days together, and at first, everything seemed normal. But then, small things started to unravel. She would text him, and he'd quickly move away, whispering just a minute under his breath. The way he looked at her, it was a mix of guilt and fear. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but deep down I knew something was off. I remember the day she came to me at my workplace, looking anxious and on edge. She whispered something about her husband's past, how he'd mentioned an ex-girlfriend in passing conversations. At first, I brushed it off as a harmless comment, but she kept pushing the issue, insisting there was more to it than met the eye. She even showed me text messages where he seemed evasive and secretive. But I just laughed it off, told her I was sure he meant nothing by it. I remember saying something like he's probably still in touch with an old friend, or maybe she's a colleague. I didn't take her warning seriously because deep down I wanted to believe my boyfriend was perfect. I thought she was just being overly paranoid and insecure. But looking back now, I realize those were warning signs, subtle hints that something was amiss. If only I'd listened to her. If only I had seen the red flags for what they were. I'll never forget that day. I stumbled upon his phone records. It was like a punch to the gut. There were calls to a number I didn't recognize, multiple times a week. At first, I brushed it off as work-related or a friend in need. But something kept nagging at me. That's when I started digging deeper. I asked him about it, but he just laughed it off and told me I was being paranoid. The more I pushed, the more evasive he became. It was like he was hiding something from me. I still remember the day I found out my boyfriend was married, like it was yesterday. It's etched in my memory forever. I had been feeling increasingly paranoid about our relationship for weeks. His behavior had become so erratic, and he would often cancel plans at the last minute or be unreachable for hours on end. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to discover. I walked into his apartment, and my mind racing with worst-case scenarios, but still not expecting this. He looked up from his phone, a mix of guilt and fear written all over his face. That's when I saw it, the wedding ring on his finger, plain as day. My world came crashing down around me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The air was sucked out of my lungs, leaving me breathless and numb. All I could think was, how could you do this to me? How could you lie to me? His silence was deafening, and it only fueled my anger and hurt. I couldn't speak. All that came out were tears and sobs. I walked into the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to know the truth. "So," I said, my voice shaking with rage, "you were married?" His eyes darted around the room before landing on mine, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of guilt. But then, his expression hardened. He took a deep breath, as if preparing himself for a battle. As he broke the news to me, I felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. The room seemed to spin, and all I could think about was how I'd never seen him with his wife's picture on social media. He told me they were separated, that it was a long story. But nothing made sense. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me. As I look back on this experience, I realized that my biggest mistake was ignoring the red flags. I kept telling myself he was a good person, that there must be some explanation for his behavior. But deep down, I knew better. I should have trusted my instincts and listened to that nagging voice in my head. As I look back on our relationship, there were signs that should have raised red flags for me. He was always canceling plans at the last minute, saying something came up with his family. When we went out, he'd get calls and respond to texts in a way that seemed secretive. His phone would go dark, like it had died, but I knew he was just hiding messages. And then there were the inconsistencies in his stories. He'd tell me about his ex-wife being in prison or living far away, but when I asked for details, he'd get evasive. I remember one time, we were at a dinner party, and he excused himself to take a call. He came back 20 minutes later, looking flustered, saying it was just a wrong number. But the way his eyes darted around the room, I should have picked up on that. If only I had paid attention to these little inconsistencies, I might have avoided the heartache that followed. These red flags may seem minor now, but in hindsight, they were clear warning signs of trouble to come. As I sit here, reflecting on the events that led me down this path, I'm forced to confront the fact that I ignored some pretty glaring warning signs. Looking back, there were so many red flags waving in my face, but I just didn't want to see them. For instance, his phone would go straight to voicemail, or he'd quickly switch it off when we were together. At first, I thought maybe he was just busy with work, but the frequency of these incidents raised an eyebrow. And then, there were the excuses about why he couldn't meet up on certain days. Always some vague reason about a business meeting or a family obligation. But what really caught my attention was when his social media profile started popping up in my search history. And I'm not just talking about any old friends or family members. No, it was someone with the same last name as him, but different first name. And let's be real, who does that? The more I dug, the more I realized that he wasn't as forthcoming as I thought. These were all signs that should have sent me running, but I chose to ignore them. And now, well, you know what happened next. It was a game he played masterfully, one that I fell right into. He'd make excuses for his business trips to see her, always vague about the details. I remember the first time he came back from one of these trips, all smiles and stories about how he had to work late. But what really caught my attention was when he gave me a small gift, a silver necklace with an unusual symbol etched onto it. He told me it was a good luck charm from his clients. I didn't question it then, but looking back it seems so obvious now. I'll never forget the phone call I got from his wife. She sounded broken, defeated. She told me about their marriage, how she felt trapped in a loveless relationship with a man who was emotionally distant. She said he would often leave her for days at a time, citing business trips, but she knew better. She'd caught him cheating multiple times, and each time he promised to change, to work on himself, to be more present. But the truth is, he never changed. He just got better at lying to her face. She told me about the day she found out about us, and how it felt like a punch to the gut all over again. She said she felt betrayed not just by him, but by me too. She thought I was smarter than that I should have seen the signs. And in some ways, I guess you could say I did see them. But I chose to ignore them, to convince myself that our love was different. The wife's words still haunt me today. "You took advantage of him," she said. "He used you for your youth and your beauty." It stings because it's true. And as I look back on our relationship, I realize that I didn't know him at all. The emotional fallout was immediate. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, like my entire world had been turned upside down. I kept replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering how I could have been so blind. How did he keep this secret from me for so long? The not knowing was even worse than the truth itself. I became withdrawn, stopped going out with friends, and lost interest in activities that once brought me joy. My self-esteem took a huge hit. I felt like a fool for trusting him. Simple tasks like getting dressed or leaving the house became overwhelming because every decision seemed to be tainted by the lie. Even my relationships with loved ones suffered. I couldn't bear to share this secret, so I isolated myself from them too. It was like living in a perpetual state of emotional numbness. The more I tried to make sense of it all, the more confused and hurt I became. As time went on, I slowly began to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. Rebuilding my life was a daunting task, but I knew I couldn't stay stuck in this emotional numbness forever. I started by taking small steps towards self-care, long walks in the park, yoga classes, and journaling to process my emotions. It wasn't easy, but I forced myself to get out of bed every morning, even when all I wanted to do was crawl back under the covers. I knew I had to regain my confidence if I was going to move on from this toxic relationship. So I started taking risks, trying new restaurants, attending concerts, and even volunteering at a local charity. The more I pushed myself out of my comfort zone, the more I began to feel like myself again. And then, something unexpected happened. I met someone. It wasn't love at first sight or anything dramatic like that. It was just a friendly smile from a stranger in a coffee shop. But it sparked something within me. For the first time since the breakup, I felt like I could trust myself and my instincts again. As I sit here today, reflecting on this journey, I realize that sharing my story with you is more than just a way to process the pain. It's about breaking free from the shame and silence that often surrounds infidelity. I know how it feels to be blindsided by someone you trust, to feel like your whole world has been turned upside down. But in this moment of vulnerability, I want you to see that there is hope for healing. By sharing my experience, I hope to empower others who may be going through similar struggles. Just as I learned to listen to my instincts and trust myself again, I encourage you to do the same. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to seek support, and to prioritize your own well-being. You deserve to know the truth about those who claim to love you. And for those of you who may be struggling with the weight of secrecy or deception, please know that it's never too late to break free from the chains of toxic relationships. As I sit here today, reflecting on my own journey, I want to address those who are still lying, cheating, or hiding secrets behind closed doors. If you're one of them, let me tell you something. Your actions have a ripple effect. The pain and heartache you cause may not be immediately apparent, but it's there, festering, waiting to be exposed. I know what it's like to think you've gotten away with it, the thrill of secrecy, the rush of adrenaline when you're caught in a lie. But trust me, that high is short-lived. The shame and guilt will creep in, and soon you'll be drowning in your own deceit. You may have convinced yourself that you're doing what's best for everyone involved, but let me ask you, are you really? Or are you just looking out for number one? Your partner, your children, your friends, they deserve so much better than a cheater. And to those who think they've gotten away scot-free, I want you to know that the truth always comes out. It's only a matter of time before the facade crumbles and the lies are exposed for what they are. As I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, there's one thing I wish someone had told me before getting involved with him. Be cautious of the perfect facade. He was charming, attentive, and made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. But beneath the surface, he was hiding a secret so sinister, it would ultimately destroy us both. I remember when we first met, he'd casually mention his ex, and how they were friends. Red flags started waving in my head, but I brushed them off as mere jealousy. Now, looking back, those warnings should have been heeded. Had someone cautioned me about the dangers of a man with a concealed past, I might have taken steps to protect myself. Don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for mistrust or suspicion. But when you're dealing with someone who's being evasive or secretive, trust your instincts and dig deeper. It's better to be safe than sorry. The consequences of getting entangled with someone who's hiding the truth can be devastating. Take heed of these warnings and protect yourself. It could save you from a lifetime of heartache. As I reflect on the journey that brought me to this moment, I'm reminded of a crucial takeaway. One that I hope will resonate with you as much as it has with me. It's a lesson in trust, but not the kind we often hear about. Trusting our instincts or trusting others. No, this is about trusting ourselves. When I discovered my boyfriend was married, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world around me began to spin, and all I could think was, how did I not see this coming? But in hindsight, I realized that I had been ignoring warning signs, subtle red flags that screamed for attention. As I look back on the journey I've shared with you today, I'm reminded that relationships can be complex, messy, and sometimes downright painful. But here's what I want to leave you with. The key to healing isn't about erasing the past or avoiding the truth. It's about facing it head-on. Don't be like me, ignoring warning signs, rationalizing away red flags until they become a tidal wave of hurt. If your gut is screaming at you that something is off, listen to it. For those who may find themselves in similar situations, I want to say this. Be kind to yourself, but don't be too proud to seek help. Talk to trusted friends or family members, and if necessary, a professional therapist can provide guidance through the darkest of times. And finally, remember that you are not alone. There is hope for healing, growth, and even forgiveness. But it's on your own terms, not someone else's. It took me a while to realize this, but I'm here today to tell you that it's possible to rise from the ashes like a phoenix. You can too. As I stand here today, I want you to know that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel the pain and the anger and the betrayal. But don't let those emotions consume you. Use them as fuel to rise above, to grow stronger, and to become a better version of yourself. Remember, forgiveness is not for him. It's for you. It's for your own healing and liberation. If you're going through something similar, I want you to know that you're not alone. There are people who care about you and will support you on this journey. And always remember, the truth will set you free.